Okay, so this is just my schedule for the week. Shows duties and stuff, and any of the special activities and days. Our biggest one is on Friday because of cleaning up the community playground with the rest of the school, so that's going to change things up for Friday. And also because we have our reading buddies coming from the academy on Friday as well. And we're also, it's not indicated here, it is indicated in my other plans, but we're also on Thursday doing a Skype call with Miss Stredden's class at Ancaster Meadow to share our play. So that will also be on Thursday for this week. And then the rest of the week is fairly normal. And with the change on Friday, it means there won't be any family Fridays then either, because it'll be during the same period of time. Okay, so for language this week, I'd still like to spend a little more time on Monday and Tuesday looking at poetry and the link to music, especially with word choice, letter sound combinations, things like that. Students are just kind of starting to experiment with it. So I'd like to really kind of extend that through some of the mini lessons and really getting students to see what they can do. And when we deal with some of the stuff in shared reading with plurals, then it will be a nice opportunity for them to apply some of that during our other part of our language block during our writers workshop as well, so that they can kind of put those two pieces together. And then Wednesday is going to be our Wiggly Wednesdays, and I want to be able to get them to really dig into those worm bin observations and looking at some detailed labels in their work. So while we will kind of look at the worm bin piece as well, I really want them to see about adding details, and that will be kind of the key piece, and it will kind of link our language and math part together a little bit too, and looking at it before and then looking again at it afterwards as well. And then on Thursday, because we're going to be Skyping as well, I'd also like to look at the thank you note, both for Skyping and for the toys, and maybe the kids can read that as well, but look at what kind of information we can do, and again with adding those more details. So then on Friday, because we're going to be going out in the community and picking up the garbage and just kind of in the local area around us, I really want them to be thinking a bit more about the community. It does tie into our learning goals for social studies as well, but it's a nice little segue into hopefully even getting into the mapping. I've been looking at what another grade 1 teacher in our board has done with regards to maps and getting the students to read, and it was making me think back to the last time that I had taught 1-2 as well, and maps are a great way to really get students reading for a meaningful purpose too. So I'd like to pick up some maps for them to look at, but also get them to start to think about some places that they might see and kind of highlighting it, and then maybe getting them to look and read with some of the maps too and see what they could add as they create some of their own as well. And I could see some parallels with Scratch with doing it too, that in terms of what they can make and put and label and stuff. So I'd like to take a little look at that, because that might be a good one to show them and see what they could do through that part as well. Okay, so for math this week, on Monday, we're going to do our Math Talk Mondays. And I have an image to look at with regards to the vermicomposter and some worms to get them talking. And then we're going to look at removing the food and replacing with new, what will happen to the mass. And I just want them to start to do some thinking with regards to how the food changes the weight of the container, and if it's going to matter if we say took the same food but put it into smaller pieces, would that actually change the overall weight and why? So just getting them to do a little bit of thinking with regards to it. And how taking it out changes it and why, and how much it would change it by. So again, kind of getting them to think a little bit about the actual weight. And then there'll be a little bit of a language link in terms of documenting the steps that we did, and finalize our jobs for Wiggly Wednesday, where we will be actually replacing and feeding the worms for then. And again, looking at the total number of jobs, so it kind of becomes a little bit of an addition thing that we need to have 14 total jobs, and looking at those numbers and what they could mean, and how we could come up with how many people need to do each job and why. So get them to do a little bit of thinking with regards to it. And then on Tuesday, I want them to just do some experimenting with mass and comparing different objects, and, getting them to use the balance scales, see what happens. How do they compare? What does it tell us about the actual object that we're measuring with in terms of the number needed, the number of cubes needed? So, how would it change if I were, instead of using cubes to put in, if I were to use, I don't know, rocks to measure it, or if I were to use the links, like how many more, how many less, what do they think, so they can kind of get an idea in terms of that non-standard and how it changes depending, and is there a better one to use depending on the mass of the object that we are measuring too. So how can we make those decisions? And then on Wednesday, we're going to deal with our Wiggly Wednesday, and we'll look at the actual components of the vermicomposter, and getting them to look a little bit in terms of loose parts, how they could actually represent it. So kind of looking closely at that. And then it gets us looking a little bit at measurement as well, and filling up the actual space and the size. And I want them to look a little bit at smaller versus larger, and that they need to hold true to keeping the smaller things smaller and the larger things larger, and whatever representation that they use, so that they can kind of think about which one might work, and most versus the least as well. So again, kind of getting them to think about the amounts, and think about think about how we might represent it and why, and do some talking and thinking behind it, and get a little bit of that math component too in what they actually create. And then on Thursday, it's going to be our mass fair, and we're going to get a little bit into popcorn and snow cones, and maybe even some cotton candy, looking at the mass of the different items and how the mass compares as the items change. So does it actually change the mass, and why or why not, and does it in any particular case, and why might that happen, or why doesn't it happen? And getting the kids to do some thinking, even in terms of, as the size changes, does the mass change? So again, it gets a little bit into that concept of bigger, and does bigger always mean weighing more, right? So, and then on Friday, we won't be having our regular math block because of the community cleanup, so that will be a little bit different. Okay. And we have a new shared reading for this week. It is our poem on worms. It'll get us into plurals, which will hopefully overlap in terms of some of the writing and stuff, and there will be a connection to music as well, so we can put that part together. And we'll also be performing the play that we did last week on Thursday to Shirley Ann's class, and they'll be performing something to us, so we need to practice that to perform via Skype.